So for today's presentation, we're going to do an overview of expungements because expungement is not a real fun word to say, or not that anybody knows what it means. So we're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about the project where hopefully we can help you with expungement. And then we're going to have some question and answers at the end. So our goal is to have everybody, if you have questions, you can put them in the chat by any means, and then we'll at the end ask and see what we have there, and we'll probably see if we can unmute you then. So, all right. So I think the important note of this is that we'll talk about this a little bit, but anybody can get an expungement of a county, a city, which just means municipal, like city of Wichita, city of Olathe, anything like that. They can get those expunged. That's not what we're dealing with here. Same thing with juvenile expungements, and I'll talk a little bit about what those requirements are and how they differ, but that's not something that we're going to deal with today. So if you have questions about that, we can certainly kind of direct you where you need to go, but this is primarily going to be handling our state or county cases. So if you have a felony or a misdemeanor in state court, which would be one of our county courts, this is where we're going to spend most of our time chatting. Next slide, please. So what is an expungement? Chances are, if you have any sort of criminal record, if you work with people with criminal records, you may have heard of this word. If you've ever been sentenced, the judge is supposed to mention this at the end of sentencing. He's supposed to tell you what all of your expungement rights are. But what we kind of find is that expungement is not a real warm, fuzzy word. Nobody really knows what that word means. So kind of what we're here to do today is to tell you. We didn't call this an expungement project. We call it a clean slate project because that's what we're doing. We're cleaning your slate. We're wiping everything off of there so you have a fresh start. So an expungement in layman terms is just the removal of an arrest or conviction from a person's criminal record. So it's just backspacing over that, deleting it so that nobody can see it. And there are some people that can see it, and we'll talk about that, but most of the time you don't have to tell anybody about it, and you can act as if it's no longer on your record. So as for eligibility, you have to meet certain requirements. We have a whole chart for that, so don't worry about that. Also, that's what this whole project is for, is so you don't necessarily have to worry about screening yourself for that. But basically, there's a list of requirements. They differ depending on what type of record you're trying to get expunged, whether that's an arrest and conviction, arrest and diversion, anything like that. There'll be a little bit of a difference there. So Clean Slate Kansas is what we call this project. It's where you can get free legal assistance in getting that expungement done. And there's a whole bunch of more information we'll have for that later. But that's just to give you a little heads up about what we're talking about. Next slide. Okay, so going on. There are lots of consequences of having a conviction. If you have a conviction, if you work with people who have convictions, you're well aware of how it can impact employment, housing, student loans, immigration status, custody, foster parent opportunities, and each state has different rules regarding this. So it's one of those things that if you have something out of state, it may still impact you here. Unfortunately, all we're going to be able to help you with is things that happened in Kansas. If a state does have eviction rules and laws that allow you to remove something from your record, you have to go back to that court to get it expunged. Not all states do. All things considered, Kansas is pretty loose on that terms, and everything pretty much is expungible, and we'll talk about what's not. But there's lots of reasons people would want an expungement. It can impact your housing. Is one better, you can get better housing anyway. It can impact a job. A lot of people aren't eligible for jobs because of a criminal record they have. People want to become a foster parent, especially grandparents that are trying to foster their grandchildren. Got to get that off of there. Same type of thing with other opportunities, including a lot of people seem to think it helps or hurts them with their immigration status, which is probably true. Student loans, it can make you not eligible for some student loan options. And then generally, people just want to get something off their record, if nothing else, for peace of mind. One of the and I always like to point this out, a lot of senior citizens think, oh, I don't need to get that expunged. I don't need to worry about that. And in fact, senior housing is one of the top places that screens for convictions on your background. So if that's someplace you're trying to live or trying to get into, you might want to think about this. One of the common misconceptions, everyone thinks you need to get something off of your record in order to vote. This is not true. at least in Kansas, and I'm sure if you've watched the news about Florida lately, there's lots of fun stuff going on over there. But in Kansas, as long as you are no longer on paper, meaning you're not on diversion anymore, you're not on any sort of parole, you have to go re-register, but you can still vote. You don't have to go get approved by the court or anything like that. All you have to do is go file a new voter registration form. So this is where I like to point out that yes, juveniles can get expungements too. There's different rules. You have to be 23 or be 2 years since you were discharged from all of your paper and all of that fun stuff. And municipal kind of mimics county. So if you apply and you're not sure if your case is a city case or a county case, we'll help you figure that out. Chances are you may have some idea, given if you can tell us what address you went to for court, we can pretty much tell you what that is. So those are things that can be done. You can expunge a municipal case or a city case. That's just not something we're handling here. Next slide, please. Okay, so everyone is like, well, why would I want to get this expunged? What difference does that make? Because after you get something expunged, you can honestly answer on a job application that you've never been convicted of that crime. A lot of people think, oh, I'm just not going to tell them about that. It'll be fine, no big deal. That may be true, but generally, if it's something that they're going to apply and do a background check for you, they're going to find it, especially if it's a felony conviction of any kind. Those are almost always reported. Now, if you have like a municipal conviction out of a small place, that may not get reported as well or as fast to the Kansas Bureau of Investigation, but ultimately, most things are going to be on your background. So that's the best, and that's number 2. It no longer will show up on your background check. So if you're applying for an apartment, if you're applying for a job, it's not going to show up on there. I do like to point out there is a timeline. It does take about 30 to 45 days to get it off there. So people think, oh, I've started the process, I've called them, it will be immediate. I wish. Kansas is one of those places that doesn't have automatic expungements. Some places do, Kansas does not. So there is about a 30 to 45 day turnaround on that, but it does happen. A lot of other questions are, yeah, but what about Casper? My stuff's on Casper. Will it get off of there? Yep, totally will come off there too. Just takes time. So more importantly, like we said, employers, landlords, general public will not be able to see it. And that's one of the best things. Now, there are some hurdles there, and if you do come up with problems afterwards, by all means contact us, because we're trying to figure out what those hurdles are too. So if you have any of those issues, please contact us and say, hey, I'm having issues. We'll figure it out. Next slide. So, can anyone see it? Yes, there are still certain circumstances. You can still go to the courthouse if this is your case, or your attorney can go to the courthouse, request a copy of it. And a court, upon showing of subsequent conviction, what does that even mean? So let's say that you had a DUI, you get it expunged, everything's fine. 5 months later, you go and you get a DUI again. Now, for purposes of that, the court is still going to be able to look at that and determine that to be part of your criminal record. So it will still count as a second DUI, even if you had the first one expunged. So that's what that means when we say a court upon subsequent showing of a subsequent conviction. Now, there are certain employers that are still going to be able to see this, and there's certain employers that you have to divulge that you have this type of case or any convictions. And those are, if you're going to go work for DCF, Department of Children and Families, you're going to go work for the Kansas Sentencing Commission, who will also be able to have copies of this. And then anyone that the court says that you have to tell, sometimes that's victims. We rarely see that as an order of the court, but we like to let you know it can happen. But generally, if you're going to go try and be a detective, police officer, go to law school, going to go try and work for the lottery, if you're going to try and get a conceal and carry, commercial driver's license, all of that stuff is going to ask you if you've had this type of conviction, and you're going to have to answer honestly that yes, you have, even if it's been expunged. And you can note that it's been expunged, especially with Department of Children and Families. It's fine if it's been expunged. They just have to show that it's been expunged. So that's just one of those fun little things that you don't typically think of. Next slide, please. So, what does this mean? What everyone keeps talking about conviction versus diversion and arrest. Like, does that mean I have to file an expungement petition for all of these things? No. So, conviction, everyone probably knows what that means, but that's when you're found guilty of a crime. If you plead to a crime, if a jury finds you guilty of a crime, you're probably convicted. Diversion agreements, typically what happens with a diversion agreement is you remember if you were on diversion because you had to complete 6 to 9 to 12 months of some sort of check-in process, whether that was, giving UAs, checking in and having monthly meetings with an officer, something like that. So diversion agreements typically where they promise, and especially in older cases, there will be a dismissal if you complete diversion successfully. Really, the reason people do diversion versus pleading guilty or anything is so that they can say, hey, I was never found guilty of that crime. So that's kind of why you may have a diversion instead of a conviction. Now, an arrest, which everyone's like, but isn't that included? It is. So if you have an arrest and then you're convicted of a crime from that, it's going to all get expunged under the same thing. They take the whole little thing and they just wipe it out. Now, if you have just an arrest, what does that mean? So that's if you got arrested, maybe you were charged with something, it went to jury trial, you were found not guilty, then you'd have just the arrest to do, and it would do the whole case and everything. Similarly, if you were arrested and they never charged you with anything, then you would just want to get the arrest expunged. Most people aren't real worried about these. The only time that we've had people or people that are going to go try and get a commercial driver's license to drive seniors around, for some reason, that's one of those things they look at all of your arrest records, even if they were in 1970, they want to know, and they need you to get that off there so you can drive these seniors around. So that's just one of those fun things to note. That's why we have those terms at the top. So expungement is done by case number. Case number typically has CR in the middle of it, and those are the ones that we're trying to do. Not all of them, and some of the older ones are a little bit weird. So if you had a crime before 1980, it may look a little bit differently than that. But it's just a process to take care of everything, and there's going to have to be a case number associated with it. Usually there's also probably an arrest number that's different. It'll take care of that. We usually put that information down on the petition just so we make sure it's all erased together. No big deal. It also includes the arrest records, which we mentioned, and then the eligibility requirements to expunge are the same as a conviction. So if you have a diversion and you're like, oh, is that totally the same as conviction? They're all treated, it's the same form even. So don't worry about that. The only time you're going to have a different form is if you just have an arrest and you were never convicted. So that's just one of those fun things that we'll talk about later when we try and do your case. So that's just one of those fun things. So next slide, please. When can an arrest be expunged? So first of all, I tell people, if you got arrested last week and you would like to get it expunged, there's probably no way that the court or that the district attorney or county attorney is going to agree to do that in the meantime. They're waiting for the statute of limitations to run. And what that means is if you were just arrested for something, but they have several years to charge you, a lot of times they'll give you a break, especially with juveniles and things like that. They'll say, hey, we arrested you, we're not going to charge you, but if you get picked up again, then we're going to charge you. So then you would have 2 charges on you. So if this happened recently, they're probably not going to be too interested in expunging your arrest record. However, you can still do it. If it was an arrest, if it was due to mistaken identity, meaning they arrested you and they actually meant your twin or they meant somebody else, totally fine. No probable cause was found for the arrest, which basically means they didn't charge you with anything, or you were found not guilty. Which is number 3, being found not guilty in proceedings. And then when it's in the best interest of justice and charges are dismissed and not likely to be filed. And that's one of those situations where if you got arrested 10 years ago, they never charged anything, that's what you're going to probably file that under. So it's one of those things where they tell you to check one box and we check 1 or 2 because typically it'll fall under 1 or 2. So that's just one of those things to remember. There's no time limit necessarily, like I said, but you're probably going to want to at least wait until the statute of limitation runs, which means don't do it the very next week, maybe wait a minute. So next slide, please. So this is a fun chart. We try to make this as clear as possible. And I will say, if you have cases in Missouri, this is way easier. This is way easier than some of the other states that we've worked with. So first thing, we have a whole bunch of questions that if you apply for this, Abby will ask you, and one of which is, you cannot be registering for anything, whether that's a sex offender registry, whether that's a drug registry, which has only been around since 2012 and is fairly new. Regardless of my opinions on the drug registry, it's still one of those things. So you cannot be registering currently. A lot of people are like, oh, it's okay, I'm living in Missouri, because if you live in Missouri and you have a Kansas order to register, you only have to register if that state recognizes that registry. And Missouri, for example, does not have a registry. So everyone's like, oh, it's fine, I don't have to register. Unfortunately, if you're still under an order to register, you're not going to be able to qualify. So we can certainly answer more questions about that if you have them, and specifically what happens with your situation. But generally, if you're required to register, you're not going to qualify for expungement. The next thing is that the case is paid off. When we say that, we mean all of your fines, all of your restitution generally, all of your court costs. So a lot of people seem to think, oh, well, they wouldn't have let me off probation if I hadn't done that. That's not entirely false. Sometimes and during certain periods of time, probation requirements change. They will sometimes let you off probation if you pay off your fines, even if you don't pay off your restitution. So a lot of people may have restitution that they still owe. They may have fines they still owe. They may definitely have court costs that they owe that they don't know about. So the first step is call the court. Call the court where you had your conviction to figure out and make sure that you no longer have those. The reason for that is because we don't want to waste your time. A lot of people seem to, and second of all, it can give you something to work on so you can be eligible. It's frustrating. Everyone says, well, why didn't they call me to tell me I had fines? I understand. It's the most frustrating thing on earth. Chances are, if you didn't pay your fines or court costs or restitution off in a short amount of time, they have collection agencies that they refer all their cases to. Almost every court in the state has that. So if they aren't calling and harassing you, doesn't mean, unfortunately, that you still don't owe it. I've tried. We're still trying to get that done. And that kind of goes to the next one, which is no new pending felonies. So that's kind of one of those things where we sit there and it's like, okay, you paid it off, but maybe you still have a pending felony, or you're still on probation for a felony. That's still considered pending, unfortunately, until you're done with probation, until you're done with everything. So you can't have any registration requirements. You have to have everything paid off, including fines, restitution. We've tried to do case law. It's not happening yet. We keep arguing. We're arguing for it. No new pending felonies, which means, oh, yeah, but I just got picked up for that DUI last week. Unfortunately, now you're ineligible for expungement because you can't have any pending charges. A lot of times, if it's a ticket, if it's a traffic ticket, something like that, that may not be a big deal. That may be something that we can definitely do and work around. However, if you have a drug charge you are trying to get off of your record and you got picked up for possession last week, even if it's a misdemeanor, a lot of times the court will not do it. And the no new pending felonies kind of goes to the requirement that circumstances and behavior have to warrant the expungement. The court is looking for a pattern of behavior. So they want to see that you are being a successful member of society, that you are trying to turn things around. If you had a drug charge 10 years ago and then just got a misdemeanor last week, they're not going to allow that because they don't see it as a change in behavior. They don't see it as your circumstances and behavior warranting that expungement. So that's just one of those things to keep in mind. I know there's a lot to unpack there. Now the waiting period has expired. There's a certain number of years. Everyone's like, hooray, I got off probation today. I can now go get an expungement. No, you can't. So there is a 3 to 5 year waiting period, and sometimes 7, sometimes 10, but the majority of convictions have a 3 to 5 year waiting period. And that 3 to 5 year waiting period does not start until you are complete with probation, complete with parole, till you're completely off paper. Now, some municipal cases in some counties require that you pay off the fines and then the wait time starts. I think we're pretty universal across Kansas now that as long as you've paid off your fines before you file the expungement, you're good to go. So a lot of times we'll have people that have completed their wait time, they're ready to go, they just need to pay off the fines and they can do that. Then that's when they'll do it. Not a big deal. So the last one is that it has to be an expungible crime. So My general rule of thumb is that if the crime involved sex, if it involved kids, or if somebody died in the process of it, you're probably not going to be able to get it expunged. That's not always the case, but that's just a general rule of thumb that's lots of fun. So next slide, and we'll kind of go over some of that. The wait time is 3 years for the least violent crime. So traffic infractions, if you have a ticket, most people aren't real worried about the minor traffic infractions. They're worried about the suspensions and things like that, and we'll talk about that on the next slide. But cigarette, tobacco infractions, any misdemeanor is a 3-year wait time. Class D and E felonies, so these are typically victimless crimes, and then 6 through 10. So they changed the way that they do felony rankings, like everybody loves them to do. So since 1993, they're level 1 through 10. Historically, they were A through E, A being capital murder, E being the less horrifying crime. So 6 through 10 is a 3-year, and that's things like forgery. Ag assault is a 3-year wait time. You have to have that 3-year wait time completely done in order to apply, but then you can apply. You have to have all your fines, and then you're good to go. Drug crimes are a little weird. They're a little wonky, which is why if you have a drug crime, call us. Chances are if you've had one since 2012 and it's only a 3-year wait time, you're probably good to go. You probably don't have registration requirements. However, they did change some of that because that's just how everybody rolls in the legislature. So that's one of those weird changes that we'd have to and want to screen for you. Next slide, please. So 5-year, typically the 3-year are going to be the misdemeanors and the least violent crimes. The 5 years are going to be the more violent crimes, the more serious crimes. So class A, B, and C felonies, off-grid felonies. To give you some idea of what this means, like robbery is typically a 5. So robbery is going to be a 5-year wait time. Same thing like murder, capital murder, perjury, which is very serious. The weird one on here is driving while license was canceled, suspended, or revoked. We're working on it. We're trying to get that changed, but for now it's a 5-year wait time. So that's one of those things that people want to get expunged. And if you're trying to get your driver's license back, we have certain places we will refer you that have a better chance of figuring that out for you. But generally, failing to stop at an accident, and anything where a motor vehicle was used, almost always is going to be 5. So that's why applying for a title of motor vehicle under a false name and address kind of goes to perjury and untruthfulness and things like that. So then we lead into DUIs. Next slide, please. DUIs are weird. I don't have a good, quick way to explain DUIs. There's a chart. They did change the law. There was a huge period of time where if you had a DUI, you could not get it expunged. And it was the most frustrating thing on earth, having to tell people no. They've changed it. Hooray. So now if you have a DUI, you can get it expunged. Typically, as the chart kind of shows, this goes by the date of the offense. So it's not by the date you get off paper, it's the date of the offense, the date the DUI happened. That's the date that dictates all of this fun stuff. So if you had a DUI, doesn't matter if it's your first, third, fifth, whatever, before 2006, all of those are 5-year wait times. Now, if you had it between July 1st, 2006 and June 30th, 2014, 5 years for the first one, 10 years for any subsequent one. July 1st, 2014 to June 30, 2015, 5 years for the first one, 7 years for the subsequent ones. I know, it's weird. They do it, I think, just to mess with us. And then July 1st, 2015 to present is 5 years for the first and 10 years for the second. So typically, if it's your first, we can pretty much guarantee it's going to be 5 years. If it's your second, we'll have to figure that out. Some people need to get DUIs off of their background check for, like pilot licenses and things like that. They can be very serious and they can seriously inhibit your ability to fly a plane. So that's one of those things that they may want to get that off for. Next slide, please. So I mentioned if it's sex, kids, or murder, somebody died, you're not going to be able to get it expunged. So unfortunately, you're like rape, indecent liberties with the kid, anybody dying, so that murder, first degree, second degree, capital, voluntary manslaughter, involuntary manslaughter, all of those things you cannot get. The other weird one that is thrown in here is abuse of a child. A lot of people, for some reason, plead to that. So I've talked at the Defender conferences and lots of other things about, hey, maybe don't plead people to that because they can't get it expunged. But for some reason, people, it's seen as a less of a crime. But the problem is then you maybe can't get a daycare, you can't foster children, you can't do anything like that, and you can't get it expunged, which is a very big deal. So that's one of those things. This is kind of where it goes to, it has to be consistent with public welfare in order to get something expunged. You have to show that pattern of behavior, that your pattern of behavior warrants getting something off of your record. And that's where that last line where it says any comparable offense. And I won't bore you with the history of the statute, but back when they started doing this, when they first made expungement available, you could expunge anything. You could expunge murder, you could expunge literally anything. And so since then, obviously, they've dialed it back because, oh, whoa, we don't want people doing that. So that's why if you have a sex crime or something like that in the 80s, it's a decent chance you could probably get it expunged. Now, the court may object to it, but I think with the right advocacy, you could argue that that should be expungible. So that's just one of those fun things I like to explain, because any comparable offense is just a weird thing that the statutory people throw in there as a catch-all. So they just want to be able to show that you have a pattern of behavior that warrants it and that it's consistent with the public welfare. So next slide. And I was going to let Abby and turn it over to Abby and let her answer some frequently asked questions. So if you do decide to participate in this project, you're probably going to be chatting with Abby. And Abby has been dealing with all of these fun questions. So I'll let her take it from here.
Hey everybody, I'm Abby. So yeah, I often run into a lot of questions that people will ask when we're discussing their cases. Some of the more common unusual circumstances are when somebody has one case number that has multiple charges on it, and some of the charges are on that non-expungible crimes list, but some of the charges can be expunged. So that situation is a little weird. Technically, the way that works is if the charges that can be expunged are eligible for expungement, you can petition to get that expunged, but the way that works in practice is that they essentially redact the case file for that. So it's like they black out the part that's getting expunged, but the part that can't be expunged is still there, which can kind of be weird when employers or someone are looking for those records, because a lot of times people will assume that if there's something that's redacted, something that's blacked out, that it must be worse than whatever they can actually see, even though it's kind of the other way around. So depending on the circumstances, it may or may not help you if you try and get part of a case expunged when you can't do the whole thing. But that's, something to discuss on an individual basis. A common question that comes across my desk is regarding firearms rights, and that is another one that can be a little complicated. It is possible in some cases for you to get your right to bear firearms back, but not always. And so we're never going to guarantee that trying an expungement is going to restore that right to you. It can be complicated to determine because there's multiple laws that apply, and it might depend on other cases that you have, even municipal cases, especially something with domestic violence or anything like that, if you've got anything like that on your record. But basically the easiest way to figure out whether or not you can possess a firearm is to apply for a concealed carry permit, because you can't get in trouble for just applying for a permit because it's not an actual firearm. So the worst thing they can tell you is, no, you can't have one. But when they do, they'll send you a denial notice that will tell you exactly why. So if maybe there's a case that you forgot about, that's the one that's preventing you from being able to have a firearm, then we can go back and look into expungement of that. But yeah, sometimes expungement will help, but not always. So if that's something that you're interested in and you apply for the program, let me know. We can try and discuss that on a more individual basis. I believe Christy actually covered this next one earlier, but the approximate timeline for how long the expungement process takes is about 90 days, but it really can vary. part of the process is when you get your petition sent to the district attorney's office. So they do their own review of it before it actually gets filed with the court. They have to do stuff like if there's a victim in the crime, they have to send out victim notification letters. They go over your records and check to make sure everything in the petition is factually accurate, things of that nature. And depending on a few different factors, that review that they do can take longer. They usually say 4 to 6 weeks for them to do that review. But occasionally, especially if there's like, if it's a really old case and there's victims in it and they have trouble figuring out where to send the victim notification letters or something, that can be one thing that makes it take a little longer. But anyway, the moral of the story here is that 90 days is an approximate estimate. It's a little weird right now just because of the pandemic, but we're still tentatively sticking to that 90-day approximate timeline as an estimate here. Okay, so big one is regarding cost. So for each case number, because we do expungements by case number, the court charges a filing fee of about $200. It's $195, unless you have an attorney who's e-filing it online, and then they add a couple dollars to it. But anyway, it's about $200, and that's per case number. It's not by charge, so if you've got multiple charges under one case number, that one $200-ish filing fee takes care of all of that. If you've got multiple case numbers and you want to get them all expunged, you might have to prioritize. Like if there's some cases that are just misdemeanors, you probably want to prioritize your felony cases first, things like that. But once again, that's something we can discuss on a more individual basis. Ultimately, if you're in dire financial straits, if you would have a lot of difficulty paying that filing fee, there is a form that you can fill out, and it's a request to the judge that they waive or reduce that filing fee. Since it's just a request, it's up to the judge's discretion, so there's no guarantee that will work. So be prepared and try to save up to try and pay that filing fee anyway, just in case it doesn't work. But there is that possibility that you can submit that form to try and get that fee waived. They usually don't just reduce it. I don't think I've actually seen that. They usually, if they're going to approve it, they usually just say, whatever, we're just going to waive it completely. Okay, so moving on to the last bit here. If you want an attorney to help you with an expungement case, or if you've got questions about your eligibility and such, we actually have a program that we're running right now that can give you free attorney help for your expungement case. And so to discuss the part of that program, I'm going to hand it over to Renee, who was introduced earlier. Renee Dancer is from Harvard Law School's Access to Justice Lab, and she's going to tell you a little bit about their side of our project that they're doing in conjunction with us here at Kansas Legal Services.
Great, thanks, Abby. Hello, everyone. Like Abby said, my name is Renee Dancer. I'm here from the Access to Justice Lab at Harvard Law School. We are researchers, so we're interested with this project, particularly in understanding how record clearing or how expungement is helping you all to improve long-term housing stability and employment stability. And we suspect that expungement really helps a lot with that. And we want to be able to tell people that in order to help form policy about expansion of expungement or reform of expungement law. I just want to say first, I've been managing the chat, and I think I've answered everyone's questions so far, but just to go through some overall overarching items, that we will post a recording of this presentation on the KLS website and their Facebook page. We also, I know that if you have an interest in learning more about your personal case, you'll want to contact Abby. She's a great resource. And then if you have an interest in having a presentation like this done for a group of clients that you serve, or for staff that may serve clients that may be interested in expungements, you can contact either Christy or Abby, but I've put their phone numbers in the chat, so you can go ahead and take a look at that. So like I said, we're at the Access to Justice Lab at Harvard Law School. We're working with Kansas Legal Services to understand the effect of expungement long-term. So we're going to actually, anyone that chooses to work with Kansas Legal Services to get an expungement will also be asked to participate in the study. And if you participate in the study, then you'll get to spend time with us for 5 years. We'll reach out to you periodically just to see how you're doing and see how your case is progressing. You can go to the next slide, Abby. And we want to know specifically, how does expungement affect housing stability, recidivism, and employment stability? So our hypothesis, right, we suspect that expungement helps people maintain and better housing, helps them gain and maintain better employment, and helps reduce interactions with the criminal justice system. You can go to the next slide. If you enroll in this study, I think Abby mentioned this, but if you enroll in this study, you'll be given either full scope legal representation or limited scope legal assistance, and that will be determined not based on any eligibility criteria, but it will be determined randomly. So you have the chance to get an attorney the whole way. You also have the chance to get an attorney part of the way. So let me describe what that means. An attorney the whole way, right, is someone will help you fill out your paperwork and file it for you. An attorney, a limited scope legal assistance or attorney part of the way is someone you'll be directed to the online system in order to help you fill out the forms, and then an attorney will take a look at your forms, will make sure everything is there that you need, and give you some guidance on what your next steps will be, so get you information about how to file everything. You can go ahead to the next step or next slide, Abby. And like I said, we're gonna look at data for 5 years, so that's a long time. You'll only hear from us for 2 of those 5 years, but we're still going to be looking and checking up on you for 5 years. So what that means is we will check to see how your housing and employment is going for 5 years, but we'll reach out to you periodically for 2 of those 5 years. So you'll be able to chat with us about how you feel things are going and specifically answer some surveys. Every time you get a survey and every time you answer a survey completely, and you'll get a monetary incentive. So you'll get an incentive in the form of a Walmart gift card or Venmo transaction. So Venmo being electronic payment back and forth. And there's an opportunity for you to earn a total of $175 just by answering surveys if you participate in the study. Abby, do you want to go to the next slide? And that's it. That's all I have to say. I just want to make sure you have my contact information if you need to reach out. We're really excited to work with everyone, but most importantly, we're excited to expand the services that Kansas Legal Services is offering around expungement. And so with that, I'll turn it back over to our experts at KLS.
Yay, thank you, Renee. All right. And sorry, let me move my Zoom stuff so I can actually see my own slides here. Okay, so if you are interested in this program, we really encourage you to apply with us so that you can get enrolled in the program so that we can make sure you're eligible. There are a few qualifications. We're really just taking people who still live in the state of Kansas, and we want people to be able to travel to the court where they were convicted if necessary. Just because there is a possibility of having a hearing that you might have to attend. So if you live several states away and you wouldn't be able to come to court if you needed to, that's going to make it difficult for us to help you. Another requirement, of course, is that your case must meet the eligibility requirements to be able to be expunged, but that's something that will help you figure out when you apply for the program. Christy covered this at the beginning of the presentation, but the types of cases that we're taking for this program have to be adult cases, so we're not taking juvenile cases in this program. And it has to be from a Kansas district court, so that's a county level court. And we're not taking municipal, which are city level court cases for this program. This almost kind of fits under frequently asked questions, but sometimes people assume, oh, it's Kansas Legal Services, they just help lower income people, and I'm, not quite that low income, so I probably can't qualify for this program. But actually for this one, we don't have any income requirements. So it's open to anybody. So if you want to join the program or just get more information about it, you just need to put in an application. And there's 2 ways to do that. You can start your application online at kansaslegalservices.org. You can do that at any time. Or on weekdays from 7:30 a.m. to 5 p.m., you can call our application hotline and you can talk to our central intake staff and they'll get your information. And then they will set up an appointment over the phone between you and me. Yay. So now is a great time for people to ask any questions they have, anything that we missed, or clarify something that maybe wasn't clear. If you've got questions, put them in the chat and we will be happy to answer.
So Abby, we do have a couple questions that I want to ask for the group. I've been answering all of them, but just so that everyone has the opportunity. I have a lot of questions about Clean Slate specifically. So one is, if you have, with Clean Slate, do you still pay the filing fee? And is the Clean Slate Kansas program ongoing?
Yes, so Clean Slate Kansas, this program will be going at least through the end of this year and the first part of next year. We might extend it even longer. In regards to the filing fee, you are still responsible for paying your filing fees if you're in this program. But like I said, there is that waiver form that we can help you with filling out so that you can request that the filing fee be waived. As part of the program, whatever attorney assistance you receive through KLS is free of charge. So you don't have to worry about attorney's fees or anything like that. The legal services are free, but we can't control what the court charges you. We can only help you with the waiver to request the filing fee be waived.
Great. We actually have a question for me, so I'm going to answer it for the group. The question is, what if there is no negative effect as a result of your criminal record, so that the research would show, right, no negative effect, and so expungement was neutral, right? It didn't help or hurt you. So are you still eligible for Kansas Legal Services help? Absolutely. You can still pursue an expungement, and if what the research shows, then that's what the research shows. We just want to know the answer, right? Whether it's what we think it will be or not. Okay, so another question, once you contact KLS and apply for the program, how long will the process take?
So once again, I'll probably give you about that 90-day timeline from start to finish. They schedule a phone, once you've got the application, that initial application finished, the central intake staff will schedule a phone appointment for you and I. Usually I'm available the following week or the week after that for a phone appointment. So it might take a week or two for us to have that initial appointment. And then after that, it just depends on how long it takes for us to verify that you're eligible for expungement and get the enrollment paperwork to you so that then you can fill out the paperwork and return it to us so we can actually get you enrolled in the program. And then after that, it's about 90 days. So you might add a couple more weeks onto it. But yeah.
Okay, one more question. Will you do a similar presentation for the expungement of juvenile records?
Ooh, I think that might be more of a question for Christy, actually.
We certainly can. I mean, we've done juvenile presentations before to certain groups, specifically to DCF. I know we've done them, and we've done them to Big Brothers Big Sisters. If that's something you're interested in, certainly contact us and we can get that set up.
Great. Okay, another question. After applying, do you receive a response even if you don't qualify for the program?
So once you put in your application, like if you put in an application online, you give them some of your information and then you'll be contacted by our central intake staff so they can get the rest of your information. And then they will be able to set you up with a phone appointment with me. Or if you live out of state or you have a municipal case or something, they will schedule an appointment with you with a different Kansas Legal Services staff person who will give you different advice that applies more to your situation. But it's like you're going to have contact with me one way or the other if you at least meet the basic eligibility requirements to be in the program. So yeah, and then if I'm not able to figure out from our first phone call whether or not you're eligible, then I'm going to do some more research and then I will follow up with you. But yeah, you'll definitely get a response one way or the other. You will know whether or not you're eligible for the program.
Great. And then Christy and Abby, just to confirm, if somebody wants you to do another presentation for their staff or their employees who may be serving a population that also is in need of this expungement service, they can contact either or both of you. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Okay. I don't have any additional questions in the chat. So I think we can probably sign off. Just a reminder, we'll post this recording on the KLS website and the Facebook page, so you can watch it over and over again if you'd like.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.